In the second part of our algebra lesson, we're working on adding polynomials and subtracting polynomials. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to collect like terms and add and subtract polynomials to simplify expressions. Remember that polynomials are just terms that are added together. So I have 3 terms and another 3 terms, so 2 trinomials we call them, and they're added together. You can just get rid of the brackets because it's adding, but the one thing we need to be a little bit careful of is just where I have this adding a negative, I have to be a little bit careful about making that just a single negative sign. The reason that works, we'll just think about some integer, plain integers. If I had 0 and I wanted to take away 5, I can't take away 5 from 0, so I would have to put 5 positive things down so that I could take them away. But if I'm going to put 5 positive things, chips, I have to put 5 negative chips. Hopefully you agree now that that is just the number of 0 because you have equal pairs of positive and negatives. You have 5 of them. If I want to now take away 5, I would simply cross out 5 positives and I'd be left with just 5 negatives. So this equals -5. In the same way, I can show that adding 0 add -5 is going to give us the same result. So I'm starting with 0, which looks like nothing, and I'm adding 5 negatives. I'm again left with -5. So that's why when we're talking about algebra tiles, if you have a -5, it's the same as adding -5 into the picture. So adding -4x squared is the same as subtracting 4x squared. So once I've got rid of the brackets, the next thing I need to be able to do is to collect like terms. I can either go through and highlight the ones that are the same. So I can say 3x squared and -4x squared are like terms. I've got 5x and 2x being like terms, and I want to really make sure I use the signs that are in front of them to help me as well. And I've got a -1 and a +1. So if I can see what those pairs are going to make, I don't necessarily need to draw it, but for this first one I did. So you'll notice that I drew out 3x squared plus 5x minus 1 minus 4x squared plus 2x plus 1 in algebra tiles. And the next thing I'm going to do is move the tiles that are like terms or the same shape together. So that would look like this. Now I can look for those 0 pairs. So I'm going to be able to cross out 3 reds with 3 blues because that makes 0. And I'm left with just 1 blue, which represents -1x squared, or -x squared if we want to write it without the 1. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 x tiles all together, and the -1 and the +1 make 0 when I put them together. So my final expression when I put this all together is going to be -x squared plus 7x. And you'll notice that I used a plus in between because these were positive tiles. When I'm subtracting, it's not as easy as just getting rid of the brackets. So we need to be really careful when we look at the bracket here and here. When we remove them, the signs are going to change. So let's think about this in terms of integers first, play around with those a little bit, and then we'll see why the colors change when we subtract a polynomial. So that second bracket, because you're subtracting everything in that bracket, the signs or the colors you notice will change. Why does that happen? Well, if I'm subtracting a positive, so let's say I'm taking just 0 and I'm subtracting +1. I can't take away 1 if I don't have anything there. So I'm going to put in a +1 I'll be able to take away. And in order to do that, I have to have a -1 as well. That makes 0. Then if I want to get rid of, take away 1, then I would cross out the +1 and I'm left with just the -1. Likewise, if I had 0 minus 1, I have 0 and I'm going to remove 1 from 0. So if I have that set up, I'm going to have to take away 1. So I need a positive 1, but I'm starting with 0, so I'm going to need a negative 1 as well. And if I take away 1 from 0, I'm left again with negative 1. So when I go through and I see subtracting a positive, so subtracting a positive, hopefully it makes sense why that becomes just a subtraction sign. Okay? Now, if we look at subtracting a negative, why does that become a positive? Well, if we do 0 subtract negative 1, I want to be able to take away a negative 1, so I have to put a blue down. But a blue chip needs a red chip to make 0. And if I take away that blue chip, I'm left with a positive 1. So subtracting a negative becomes a plus. Okay, so hopefully that explanation helps in terms of figuring out what the signs are. Basically what happens is that that minus on the outside, so I'll just highlight it here, that subtraction sign, just changes the colors of each of those terms in the second bracket. It changes their sign. Remember the rule, add the opposite. Okay, and I just showed you why that worked. So once I've done that first step, now I can go through and collect like terms. This time I'm not going to draw it, I'm just going to highlight the ones that are like. So 3x squared and plus 1x squared gives us a total of 4x squareds. And I've got a negative 2x and a positive 2x, and hopefully we can see that makes plus 0x, which we don't need to write down at all. And finally, I have a negative 1, subtract 1. Negative 1 and another negative 1 makes negative 2.